I've chosen a bit more well-lit place for this 3, I don't know what time it is in the morning video. I have been watching a interview with Brad Bagilo, which, as you know, was the super soldier that James Rink posted about on his WordPress blog, and you know, I was following up on the information to hear what she had to say, and I'm about 30 minutes into the an hour and a half interview, and have had to stop it because others keep talking about things, and although it's great that my memories are getting confirmed, I feel like it, you know, if I talk about it, it sounds like I'm imitating. She has talked about the cages so far, which are these rows of cages that they would stick people and children in. And I do remember cages, but I kind of thought they were more involved with one of my first missions, and since it's one of those snippets that could also just be a fake memory, I've never really played on it. And the lightning fast running, which, as I mentioned in the last video, has come out, so I thought I would talk about that because, well, one of that, because that's one of the things that I've always remembered since, like, before kindergarten. We lived on a dirt road. I used to take sticks and draw pictures on the dirt road and tell myself stories and things. And the story I told myself frequently was about a young girl who was in a special school to be taught how to use your superpowers. And she was the fastest runner in her class or team. Well, I mean, the way I saw it, it was group. And she was the fastest. They would hold races, and she could always run the fastest. And she felt like no one liked her for it. And I very much identified with this. And so for years in that period of time, I would run up and down the street trying to regain that speed that I apparently had in my alternate life. And you wouldn't even think, you know, looking at my fat, lazy body now, but I was really about the running, to the point that in a couple of years after that in school, I was so fast that our coach actually personally invited me onto the soccer team that you had to try out for. He didn't want me to try out, he just wanted me on because I was the fastest. And so hearing her talk about the lightning speed and remembering it the way I've always done and how it carried forward in my life, my mother shut it down instantly. In case you're wondering what had happened, she said no, wouldn't let me do these things because she comes from the era of women belong in the kitchen, you see. She doesn't do that now, she has to work for a living, but back then it was a different story. You know, I've heard, I think it was Max Spears casually mention the lightning speed, and it's like, I really should talk about this and my experience with it. So this is my experience with it, as much to the point as I'm able to do, because I have to say that the thought of actually revealing real details makes me thump in here and have like this bad basket feeling, almost like guilt, like, well, you're lying, but it's also like fear and bad feelings, you know, that I can't identify. But we would go to the group, and the entire point of the group was running and speed, and you were taught a lot of different techniques. All of it was with running, you know, with your feet. And there's a technique that makes you really fast, and it involves being able to slip or step sideways. And basically you slip your body through layers of reality, and that's how you get forward really fast. It has nothing to do with being a fast runner so much as how well can you slip. And so you're basically skipping through reality. You know, it's kind of interesting how a few years ago this ability was released when they started releasing stuff about quantum physics to the public, and I was like, oh yeah, slipping. But yeah, you can do it, and it also is very handy if you want to avoid raindrops. I used to get out in the rain and play in the rain when I was a kid, just so I could practice avoiding raindrops. Can't do any of that now. I tried a few months ago, and it's you know, it just, my father once told me that, you know, your quote unquote psychic powers are like any muscle. If you don't exercise them, you lose them. And we would hold races, frequent races. They were contests with the whole class, and this person that I identified with, that I'm pretty sure was me, but it could have just been someone in the class I liked, they were the fastest. And they were also a little separated from the group a lot. They didn't get in with the group. They were always the outcast. The other students didn't care for them. They were jealous. You know, I'm freaking 3 and 4 years old, knowing about these social nuances that at my age, when I had never even been to preschool, should never have known about, but I did. And it was really tough. And the whole point to this, I had been given to understand, was so that you could pass messages and information along faster. And I was given to understand that that was the next step once you pass the class. But I couldn't begin to tell you. Reading Carla Turner's book, which I got to get her second one, which is a little difficult because it's $100, and I've learned that ebooks don't work with me, so I want to get a physical copy, and I don't have $100 at the moment. She kind of offhandedly mentioned the pit that I remember, which happened somewhere, I cannot remember if it was before or after the speed classes, and with body parts and things, and it's basically like this underground volcanic area where the reptilians inhabit, and there's like these tracks with these carts, and body parts are being processed in flame, and there are a lot of very unhappy people being forced to work that, and they're basically chained to the carts, and I had to work in there on cleaning up detail. And someone I was allowing to probe my memories as they were trying to help me remember, I actually saw them burst into tears when they touched upon that. I didn't know anything about MK Ultra back then or what was going on, so it was really difficult for me to fathom why this person would cry at this snippet of a memory I've got. But according to everyone else, it's not a very good memory. I've just got this snippet though. But there was an overlord of the level, and it was a level, and his name was Gromatesh. I cannot pronounce it properly. He was not human. Gromatesh. I can't do it. And he had this staff, and his title was basically keeper of the staff. And I served him. I don't know how I served him. He was just the boss, you know. And I do know that some of what I had to do was picking up some body parts and cleaning up. So I was probably one of the many that was not happy. But, you know, when I analyze the people that are there that don't get to leave, and if they ever were up here known by people that are on missing persons lists, versus my life, I was just doing these things as training, briefly, kind of like going to work for a couple of hours or whatever. You know, I might even have been astrally put into someone else's body. I have no way of knowing, but I do know that I was a very small child when this happened. And thirdly, Mars, which I had promised to tell you guys about like a year and a half ago, 2 years. And when people talk about Mars, I talk about the portals, I talk about, you know, oh, well, you know, the army's already there. One person talked about animals that he saw, which was really interesting when I saw one of those animals on some of the Mars photographs. And you know, you can actually see the sequence where the little guy rolls, stands up, rolls again, and rolls away. But I don't know if it was Mars, and that's one reason why I never touched upon it. But there were these people that rode big birds, and the terrain was a lot like Mars. Matter of fact, I look at photos of Mars, and I'm like, well, that looks familiar. But then again, all places like that tend to look the same, so who knows. Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, which I had only seen once, really made me identify with this time, which is why I suspect the memory. But the people were basically soldiers that were stationed up there. I don't know much about it. but there were female soldiers as well as men. I remember making a personal mental note on that was a big deal, and they had these big birds they rode, and their armor looked like armor, like American armor. So, but now it's like all the information I had to give you's gone. I saw something moving over there, which is why I stopped. So I guess that's it for this feed. But there you have it, some more information. Sorry it took me so long to cough it up. Guess I'll go back to listening to that podcast.